Prakash, for inviting me here, giving me an opportunity to talk to you all. This is a topic that's very close to us because I'm sure for many of you it's something that is more misunderstood than understood. Although we all know about mental health, the sad fact is it's kind of, low priority, particularly even in our governments, in our healthcare scenario. Mental health and whatever surrounds it is relegated to the background. And I'd like to begin by telling you a little bit of how do you define health, Can we have the next first slide, please? So basically, if you look at the definition that WHO has given, looking at this definition, it's not just limited to physical health. It's not merely the absence of disease or infirmity, but rather a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being. So this is an all-encompassing definition, wherein the mental health component is integral to healthcare. But like I said earlier, the mental health component continues to be something of a low priority particularly in low and middle income countries, where I guess healthcare priorities are so many. Mental health doesn't, achieve the relevance it ideally should. Next, please. So basically, what is this mental health? I mean, there are a lot of words that go into describing. We talk about psychological health, behavioral health, mental health. These are all umbrella terms that kind of signify a similar thing. Basically, what does it mean? It's a level of psychological well-being or an absence of mental disorder. But there are several kinds of mental disorders which I will be touching upon as we go along today to give you a sense of the, the vastness of this field, and also to sensitize you to how do you recognize it. If you do get it, how do you deal with it? If you do see it, what should you do? These are some of the things that I'd like to touch upon as we go along today. So it's basically a state of someone who's functioning at a satisfactory level of emotional and behavioral adjustment. That's what we would all aim for. That's all we'd like to see happening, that we are all well-adjusted, happy human beings, working and dealing with the stresses and pressures that we face every day. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. So it includes an individual's ability to enjoy life and strike a balance between life activities and efforts to achieve psychological resilience. That's eventually the ultimate that we would all like to see happening. Now, these are other ways that I think most of you are already familiar with it. Maintaining good mental health is crucial to living a long and healthy life. People always talk of this elixir. What is it that will make me live longer? Let me tell you, a good mental state, a well-balanced mind is certainly one of the keys to getting you there. A good mental health can enhance one's life, while poor mental health can prevent someone from living an enriching life. So these are just some basic pointers to you all, much of which I'm sure you're already familiar with. So let's move on and let's look at issues concerning prevalence, because this is one of the things that I guess people will always wonder about. How big a problem is mental health illnesses? How large are they? Does it deserve the attention that I say it should get? Now, if you look at this prevalence rates that I have out there, it's 9.5 to 370 per 1,000 population. It's a huge range, isn't it? From something as low as say about 10% to about 370. That's a large prevalence estimate that I'm telling you. And these vary. It's not consistent. Each time you do these surveys, each time you may come up with different prevalence estimates. And let me tell you the reason why that happens. Next, please. Now, before I do that, I'd just like you to run you through some of these mental disorders that commonly heard of, and maybe many of you may be familiar with it too. You may have read about it, seen about it in movies or heard about it. And let's look at what are these prevalences and how serious they really are. The schizophrenias, as they are referred to, is one of the more chronic psychotic conditions, more severe forms of mental illness. Here again you see a prevalence rate of 1%. Now some of them may look small. Mood disorders is about 3%, mental retardation 0.6%, dementias, particularly amongst the elderly. This is a condition that, I remember when I first started doing some research in way back when I started my research, my first study was looking at dementias. At that time, it was considered that dementia is the bane of the West, the affluent countries, because people live longer. Whereas here, the life expectancy was much lower. So we are unlikely to see these kinds of diseases. So we carried out these large surveys in rural and urban settings. And amazingly, our rates were pretty high. And this was something that set us thinking. We wanted to figure out why is this? Why is it that we're seeing such high rates of dementias in people who are in their early 50s? Not an age where you expect to see brain cells getting atrophied or, that kind of a thing. And that's when we realized that the problem lay not in the condition per se, but in the tools we were using to screen for and diagnose these conditions. These were all tools that had been developed in Western cultures, so they were very Western oriented in terms of identifying. For instance, a very important component of recognizing this cognitive impairment is the fact that you will have memory problems, memory dysfunctions, you forget. It's not the usual forgetfulness that all of us go through. It's a little more severe than that. You have personality problems and a whole series of such kinds of issues that happen. And this particular instrument that we used was totally geared towards that way of thinking. So things like your date of birth. You should know what is your date of birth. You should know, who your prime minister is, who your president is. These are basic things that in Western culture, if you don't know, there's obviously something wrong with you. So when we apply these tools in our rural populations, in our urban, even in our urban setting, many of them don't even know their age. They don't know their date of birth. And so automatically the algorithm was so set up that we got classified as having dementia. So that's when we started looking back and started looking at culture and seeing how that influences, and what is relevant to our culture may not work out somewhere else. So that's just for you to understand that some of these prevalence estimates could also vary because of the tools we use to diagnose. Then there are a whole range of common mental disorders under which we have things like phobias and depressions, etc. Alcohol dependence, a big problem in our country, and I'm sure many of you are aware of that. And of course, child and adolescent disorders. So these are some of the common conditions that you see. And like I said earlier, the reasons for these wide variations is because of all these factors, the diagnostic methods, the systematic underreporting. And this basically hinges because of a large element of stigma that surrounds mental illness. Nobody likes to say, I'm suffering from a mental illness. It's such a highly stigmatized condition that people would rather remain untreated rather than seek care. Because once you're out there, it's known. And then, of course, the ostracism and all of that surrounds this happens. And then, of course, the tools you use are sampling procedures. So all of these, are some of the common reasons for why we see such huge variations. But let's not forget the fact that although these prevalence rates seem small, when you translate it into numbers in our population, which is huge, these are huge problems. And we need to recognize. And another very major problem in our country is the lack of trained psychiatric personnel, trained psychiatrists. We have a total of only 4,000 psychiatrists to look after this huge mental health burden, which is nowhere near, what we actually need. So it's a big problem in our country. This just to familiarize you with the fact that these kinds of problems are, some of these big name celebrities have had problems like these. Many of you may have known of John Nash, Beautiful Mind, that wonderful movie that came some time ago, who was diagnosed to suffer from schizophrenia. Very brilliant guy. But then, because of the disease, his whole functioning was seriously impaired. Emma Thompson, an actress, Elton John, a great singer, he's got bulimia, which is an eating disorder. Here they tend to binge eating, they eat huge amounts of food, then they feel guilty, and then they try to vomit it and get it out, and they go through a lot of depression. Many of them are linked. You might well wonder what's Marilyn Monroe doing out there in that picture. Such a beautiful woman, everybody tried to emulate her, but she suffered from low self-esteem. Can you believe that? A woman like that, suffering from low self-esteem. This is something that we see a lot in even our cinema actresses. You must have heard about many of them committing suicide. Many of them feel used, because they know that maybe their self-worth is low, and as a result, a sense of, depression comes in, which, and she did commit suicide eventually. Abraham Lincoln, can you believe it? I know how he ran the country, but he was known to suffer from depression too. So like this, there are many others, and these guys came out of the closet, as it were, and so we know the fact. So one of the main reasons why this whole problem surrounds mental is because of the stigma. Nobody.
Being a football season, could we just talk about obsessive compulsive disorder of David Beckham?
Can I? Yeah, I mean, he's supposed to have that. He's
what is that actually?
Basically obsessive is obsessive thoughts. You have the same repetitive thoughts that keeps coming in your head again and again and again. And your compulsive behavior, for instance, you may want to keep washing your hand. You may want to keep checking that the door is locked. These things can be very debilitating. I remember this one patient I had who was, at that time some years ago, who was actually a schizophrenic patient who had a combination of that plus OCD, as we call it. He used to spend hours in the bathroom just to brush his teeth because he had this feeling that he hasn't done it. He has not done it adequately enough. So he keep on doing it and spend hours, half the day will go off in the bathroom. So you can just imagine how debilitating it can be. Okay, so can we move on? Next one, please. So what is the stigma? This is basically a Greek word, which in those days it was like a mark that was kind of branded on an individual who was, somehow discredited for whatever reason. Basically it happened because if you can't explain something, in those days, in medieval times, understanding of mental illness was very poor. Nobody really knew what this was. Why did a person behave like this? They used to have, the thought that this guy is somehow possessed, or some witchcraft this person is going to do, and so they would brand such individuals. And as you know, in those days these witches used to be burnt at the stake because of their bizarre behavior. So right from time immemorial, these mental illnesses has been stigmatized to a large extent. These people have even been brutalized. Yes, next please. So basically this is to save yourself. All of us, we all need an explanation when we see of something happening, something that makes sense to us. And when you can't explain and you're not able to identify with it, you try to distance yourself from these kinds of problems. This is something that happens in our unconscious state. You may not be able to put a finger to it, but basically that's what goes on in our mindset when we look at these things. So we are the sane and they are the insane, and never the twain shall meet. You distance yourself from this kind of thing. So it comes from misguided views and it comes from poor understanding. The deeper you understand, the better you understand mental illnesses, the more you begin to accept the fact that it's another illness. Just like we have physical health problems, similarly people have mental health problems, and the two should be seen synonymously. It should not be seen as this is something weird and some sin of past that you have committed, or some crimes that you have done in your past birth which are being revisited now, which is why all the stigma that surrounds this particular condition. Yes, next please. And the other reason for stigmatizing is the fear that people have. The sense of fear that these guys are probably very violent, and to a large extent I hold media responsible. They always portray people in that kind of a light, as violent, vicious. But actually if you see, research has shown these guys are more likely to be victims of crime, are more likely to harm themselves, basically because many of them respond to their delusions and hallucinations, and as a result of which they may commit suicide or hurt themselves or damage themselves in some way or the other, rather than being perpetrators of a crime. So they're more likely to harm themselves than someone else. Yes. Next please. So now let's look and try and understand what are the factors that cause mental illness. Let me tell you, there is no one reason for mental illnesses happening. And recently research is always talking about a causal web. That's a combination, multiple combination of factors which prevail to happen. And it doesn't mean if these factors prevail, anyone could become mentally ill. It also depends on you as an individual and how your ability to deal with these kinds of problems. But then these have been identified factors. Childhood trauma and abuse. These things are surefire methods of, kind of promoting dysfunction in the individual. So as a result, as he matures into adulthood, his ability to cope with the life's pressures and stresses are definitely impaired. And he could manifest in some sort of trauma, violence or neglect. I know one study we did where we looked at violence amongst women, where among the things we looked at was past experience of violence. Whether as a woman, as a child, this woman who is now a victim of violence had been exposed to or seen or witnessed violence in her family. Such women are most likely to be the recipients of violence, because it kind of becomes a norm for them. This is how it was when I was growing up. So it's natural, it's part of the game. That's how it is. That's how marital life will be. This is how marital rape will be. They grow to accept it and take it as part of normal life. Then social isolation, loneliness, the death, grief when you lose somebody can definitely lead to some level of stress in an individual. Homelessness, long-term physical, particularly cancer victims, people who suffer from long-term physical conditions are also prey to all sorts of mental health problems, injury, epilepsy. And then a big component is genetics. So if you've had a family history of mental illness in your family or in your close to your blood relations, there's a risk, 60 to 70% risk that your future generations will have a mental illness of some sort. Okay. So now let's look at what are the different kinds of illnesses we see in different population groups. And when I say this, I mean it's not that you don't see these in other groups. Many of these illnesses are common. For instance, psychosis you can see in young as well as adults as well as elderly. But there are some conditions that are typically unique to those particular population groups. And I'd like to show you what that is. I'd like to begin with children. Next please. Where we'd like to try and understand what kinds of illnesses we see in children. Now you see these statistics are quite scary, right? 3 students in every classroom experience a mental health problem. It could be anything ranging from learning disabilities to scholastic problems to psychosis to whatever. So a whole range of problems these children could face, yes? So basically what do we see in children? The most common things we see are learning disabilities. You may have heard of dyslexia, wherein these children have difficulty reading And they are not dumb, they are not retarded. They are very intelligent children actually. Their major handicap is their inability to read and write efficiently. And there is definite scope for these children to recover. With training, with education, they can improve and do very well. You also see a lot of behavioral disorders, autism, again another problem that can seriously affect these children, where basically is their inability to relate. Social relationships are seriously impaired for these children. And here again, unfortunately, in our country, we don't have that level of expertise to train these children, although in the West they do have. And then you have these attention deficit disorders where they are hyperactive. You notice all these when very young by looking at these symptoms: changes in school performance, poor grades. The child may be putting in all effort, may seem to be a smart child, but still, despite all that, not performing well. Excessive worry. Sometimes you see bedwetting, another very common symptom that we see in children this age. Hyperactivity, nightmares, disobedience or aggression. That's where we see the beginning of juvenile delinquency. When children become difficult to manage or control, or for whatever reason, frequent temper tantrums. All these are kind of symptoms for you to recognize that, okay, here is a child with a potential problem. Now moving on to adolescence. This is actually a healthy age. If you see, you have clinics for children, for adults, for elderly. But you don't know of adolescent clinics, do you? Whatever adolescent clinics you do have are basically to deal with these mental health behavioral problems, because that's an age of good health. Mostly adolescents don't suffer from that much of physical illnesses as they do from these kinds of mental health problems. And substance abuse is one big threat here. We recently did a study for the UNODC, United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, where they were looking at, I don't know if you've heard of amphetamine type stimulants, ATS. This is a serious drug problem, which basically is being smuggled in from the porous borders of Burma, Myanmar. They get smuggled into the north from Mizoram and Manipur, and then they're finding their way into Chennai. So we were trying to understand what makes these kids, all from good families, fairly well off. There's no poverty here. And let me tell you, these drugs are very expensive. One little tablet is called ice and crystals, costs somewhere between 1,000 to 5,000 rupees. So it's only children of means who can afford to use these drugs. And when we talk to these children, you could understand that it's not that they're coming from families who don't support them. Many of them are doing it just for a lark, just for fun, just for the thrill of it. But once they get into it, it becomes an addiction, and then the problems start. So these are major problems that our young people face, in our country, and we are seeing this. May not be so much of ATS, but definitely heroin and substance abuse like weed. All these things are major problems, and of course alcohol. Alcohol is another big major issue amongst this particular group. It's basically the desire to experiment, to show to others that I'm better than you, or something like that. Peer pressure, things like that. So defiance of authority, intense fear of weight gain, anorexia, particularly among young girls in urban settings. You see a lot of these, not so much in the rural, although let me say, when I talk to my maid, I am beginning to feel that anorexia is happening even in these so-called rural areas, where people are so conscious of how these models look on the advertisements and heroines look. They all want to emulate them. And so not eating a healthy diet, wanting to, in their mind's eye, they are not beautiful, they are not like them. And so all these problems happen. And then of course suicidal thoughts. We see a lot of suicides happening. I'm sure you're reading in the papers, and Sneha is a helpline that, trying to help these young people who are depressed or suicidal. So that's in adolescents. And adults, again the same, mood disorders, anxiety, psychosis, substance abuse, all of these you see here, but a little more magnified. And if it reaches into adulthood, if it has started from adolescence, then that's when chronicity has kind of set in. So major problems, and treatment can be very challenging, extremely challenging, unless they are on regular course of medication and treatment and therapy and all of that. Okay, next please. The elderly, like I mentioned earlier, dementias is one of the most common forms of, and there are many types of dementias. You have Alzheimer's, you have multi-infarct dementias which follow a stroke, then you have Parkinson's, and these could be in combination with depression or others. So these are, I'm almost done, yes. So these are some of the problems that you see in the different population groups, yes. So I don't want to leave with the, next please. I don't want to leave with the message that, this is scary, so what do I do? But there are ways by which you can deal with this. Recovery is definitely a possibility. Next please. So most important thing is to seek help. Let's not live in fear and be afraid of what others are going to say. After all, it's your health. You need to seek care. Go to a mental health professional is the most important message that I'd like to say. There are lots of self-help techniques which you can learn along the way. But it's not that it's not a possibility. It's definitely a possibility. But there are certain realities you must accept. You may never achieve that pre-morbid level that you had earlier. You may have to live with that. Okay? And counseling is definitely helpful. We have hospital outpatient and inpatient services. There are residential care facilities, counseling services, crisis intervention. These are all there. You just have to Google it and you get everything that you need. So a lot of services are available for people to access. Yes? Next, please. So, like I said earlier, the symptoms may recur, so you must be prepared for that. And through our counseling services, we help people to recognize when you're going into a potential relapse. So these are ways by which you can recognize and then handle it more efficiently. May mean making choices to live differently and may emerge feeling stronger and wiser at the end of the day. Yeah. So this is where friends and family play an important role, and they can help. You could be one of them. Be open-minded, show respect, help them along to deal with these problems, because that could be something that an individual definitely needs at that time. Yes, next. So I'd like to end with this message that mental health is real, it is not a joke. It impacts everyone, not just the individual, but the whole family and the community eventually, and it needs to be accepted really. Thank you.